Okay, dear friend, this is such a wonderful event for us. We're just so proud of everything that the second years have accomplished, of this group and the ones preceding them and the ones who will follow. But tonight is our chance to hear our 5 fiction writers, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful event. Welcome to all. I'm thrilled that Anne and Lincoln are back for a visit. Are you still here tomorrow night for the reception tomorrow? Yeah. Well, then fantastic, you're here for this. Anyway, so say hello to Anne and Lincoln on the way out. That'll be your last chance. John is in Philadelphia doing something with the crew. He does this every year, but in any event, I think it's a good thing to do. Anyway, I'm just going to get out of the way here. Now, are those? Yes. Yes. Are they audience? I'll start all over again. Even if they're not. They are now. Yeah, they are now. Oh God, I'm trapped. What is this thing? Anyway, I want to say that this ensemble here and this is of course Jeb's work. He gets in the afternoons of these readings that we plan outside to play Father of the Bride, and at 2 o'clock to announce whether we're going to go in or stay out. I think he made the right choice tonight, and tomorrow it seems like it's going to be nice, and we'll be over at the Culinary Club and can stagger from the reading directly into the reception. So, I gather that the fiction writers have worked out an order. Have they? If they haven't, I'll assign one. Do we know what order you're reading in? Someone say a nod. Do the introducers know what order they're introducing in? Yes. Okay. Then I will get out of the way. Thank you all for being here, and I'm looking forward to hearing the readings.
And so, obviously we're here to hear good stories told by great writers, and so I'm really, really happy to be introducing the fantastic writer, Thomas Pierce. And you will possibly be glad to know that my opinion of Thomas's greatness is not merely subjective. It might not be statistically provable, but the New Yorker, the Atlantic, the Missouri Review, and Subtropics all agree with me, so I'm at least in good company here. So does Riverhead, who bought his story collection and his novel, which will be published in 2014, I think. And so, yeah, he is wonderful. And because he's so good at writing, you might easily think that he is some sort of, I don't know, magician. He like waves his wand and gets writing done, or maybe he's some sort of weird writing automaton that lives in a basement and actually has like a keyboard for a hand. But it turns out that Thomas is a regular person just like you and me. He does not live in a basement, to the best of my knowledge. He is secretly the karaoke king of Charlottesville. He is a beast at the game of charades and also of taboo, both of which I have lost to him. He redid his own flooring in the upstairs of his house, which is impossible as far as I know. He has really strong opinions on South Carolina accents, being from South Carolina. If you ever want to hear him talk about this, ask him about the Kevin Spacey TV show House of Cards, because there's an upcountry accent and a downcountry accent, and Kevin Spacey has the wrong one. He also had a phase of his life where he escorted many young women to their a debutante does. And as a result, is a fantastic ballroom dancer as well as a fantastic writer, which you should definitely ask him to demonstrate at some point. But we're not here to talk about his taboo skills or his secret singing skills or how great of a dancer Thomas is. We're here to talk about how he's great at writing. And he is. He's totally incredible. And so I've only known him for the past school year, and I've spent most of that time trying to figure out what it is about Thomas's writing that makes it so good, why he's such a good writer. Because he has so many different stories. There are stories about the grandmotherly types with weird pets, or teenagers who work at a costume store, or some guy who's trying to take his girlfriend's kid to the zoo, or the one about the rogue paleontologist. And they're all different, but they're all so wonderful anyway. And I realized that they're mostly about family and the things that we'll go through with and the things that we'll do for the people that we love, and the complicated and wonderful knots that tie families together. But there are a lot of there's lots of stories about family in the world, and they're not all as good as Thomas's. And so Thomas's just have some special spark that really brings them to life, that makes the world that the story is in and the people in the story, just this world that you're in when you're reading it, and the people that you feel like you know. And so they're the kinds of stories that you end up reading the whole thing when you're standing on the sidewalk and you just mean to read the first paragraph, and then 20 minutes later you realize that the entire thing is gone and you're still just standing there like a weirdo. And so this is the praise that I ended up giving him here, which is, Thomas, your stories make me late to things. All right, that's it. Here's Thomas.
Thanks, Alex. That was great. Embarrassing and kind. So I'm alphabetically, I should not be up here first, but we agreed to an alternate order. But I'm glad to go first. One, because I get to relax and actually listen to the other stories, as opposed to tapping my foot anxiously. But also because we have opted, like last year, to do a joint collective thank you to the program, and I'm glad to be able to do that. To everyone who's made the last 2 years so wonderful, to our tireless counselors and soothsayers, Jeb and Barbara, thank you so much, a million thank yous, and to our professors, John's on crew now, but thank you, John, and Ann, and Scott, who's also not here, but thank him. And our professor/director, leader, Chris, thank you all for pointing the way and your advice and your mostly legible handwriting. And thank you for everything. And thank you also to our workshop mates, first years and third years. You made it such a... I did write down, I was going to write down painless, but that's not true. You made it fun, and you made it fair, and we appreciate that. So we had 2 years to write and think about writing and to sit in living rooms and talk about writing. It's wonderful. So thank you. It's been, on behalf of all of us, it's been a privilege. And so thank you. So I'm going to read a story now. Yesterday afternoon, I wasn't sure what to read, but then I discovered there was a dead bird at the top of our rain barrel. And I took it as a sign, so I'm going to read this story. It's called Hot Air Balloon Ride for One. People are always asking her if she's the F.O. Betts. She's not. Then who am I talking to? It's the man on the other end of the phone line asking her this. She shouldn't have answered the phone. Why did she? She could have locked the doors and been gone an hour ago. Her boyfriend is probably waiting for her downtown with an apple martini and a basket of garlic bread. I'm the other F.O., she says, his daughter, Fiona Orlean. My father was the real F.O. The F was for Frank, the O was for Oliver. He taught French and Latin at the high school for 12 years, piloting trips on the side for extra cash before starting the F.O. Betts Hot Air Balloon Company. Unfortunately, he was also a sucker for online poker. Fiona officially took over the business 5 years ago when they discovered the extent of his debts. Is it safe? The man on the phone asks. Does it sway a lot? I've been up 1,000 times and not one accident, she says, and no, it doesn't really sway. The man says he wants to book a trip for one, please. For one? Yes, for one. Usually we send up larger groups, 7, 8, 12. It's going to cost extra for just one person, she says. I've got money. Well, that makes one of us. How much for a solo trip tomorrow morning, he asks. She names an exorbitant sum, more than she'd usually charge, but he says okay, and she gives him an address. And the next morning, there they are, together in a hazy field at dawn, her tennis shoes and jean shorts wet from the tall grass, the hulking balloon taking shape behind her. The passenger watches from a safe distance with his arms crossed. He doesn't like the look of the basket. He asks if he should be hooked in somehow. To what? He points at the red metal crossbar that keeps the propane tanks in place. You'll be fine, she says, really. When they're ready to go, she motions for him, but first he wants to get something out of his car. He digs around in the back seat and produces a boombox and a small black metal cage. Inside the cage is a green and yellow bird. What's this about, she asks. This is magnificent, he says, the parakeet. I thought she might enjoy the ride. We don't usually do this sort of thing, she says, though in truth she has seen and permitted much stranger. She makes good money off the eccentrics. This one time, a couple wanted to go up naked, and Fiona tried to be funny by asking if she needed to go up naked too, but the couple didn't laugh. They said, sure, if she wanted to, but Fiona stayed clothed and did her best not to look. This other time, Fiona let a woman take up her easel and paints, and Fiona had expected the woman to produce a beautiful landscape painting, but when she snuck a glance at the work in progress, it was a bowl of cherries. The high mountain air, the woman explained, was full of good ions and encouraged creativity. And so, looking at the parakeet, Fiona sees a new business opportunity. The bird will cost extra. Nothing personal, she says. It's an issue of liability, of insurance. That's fine. He doesn't even ask how much. He hands her the cage, and then the boombox, and then he swings his long legs up and over the lip of the basket, even though there's a door that can open. He's in jeans, and his shirt sleeves are rolled up tight around his elbows. He could be an accountant. Small wire glasses hover at the end of his thin, ruddy nose. When she hits the blast valve, flames and exhaust shoot up the throat of the balloon, and he grips the edge of the basket with both hands. The balloon is a yellow one, with blue horizontal stripes that Fiona bought almost 5 years ago from a company in South Dakota. She has 2 other balloons, but all of them should probably be replacing. Tom is her man on the ground today, her chaser. He has been around since her father ran the company. She gives him the signal and he lets them loose. The balloon rises up fast into the warm morning air. Tom waves goodbye with a gloved hand. As the chaser, he will follow in the truck. The flame whooshes loudly overhead. Fiona loves this part, the initial breakaway from the earth, from its interstates and box stores, from its pop songs and headlines with question marks in them. All of it falls away and you are suspended, divided from it by, well, not much, a little bit of wicker. According to her mother, Fiona was conceived up here, 2,000 feet above the mountains. Counting 9 months backward from October replaced this momentous event, momentous for her anyway, in January. She imagines snow on the mountains, her parents' pink hands and gloves, boots on their feet. She imagines quilts on the bottom of the basket, their breath visible in the crisp and chilly air as they come together. The story might not be true. It doesn't matter. Fiona likes it. Usually her mother brings it up when Fiona isn't listening, when she acts far away, when she's got a head full of hot air. Her passenger doesn't seem to be enjoying the view. He's down on his hands and knees talking to the parakeet. What are you telling it? It's a she, he says, and I'm asking how she likes it up here. He presses play on the boombox and bouncy notes from his xylophone pop and clink in the air. Each tinkle dissipates a few feet away from the speakers. It sounds like music you hear during a massage. She can almost see the little desk waterfall, the massage table, the crisp white towel. Atmospheric music, a joke she probably heard her father tell on some trip. The man sticks his pinky finger through the flimsy bars and wriggles it near the bird. The basket creaks under him as he switches knees. He freezes, examines the vessel more closely. He whistles to Magnificent in a secret language. Fiona is afraid to ask what they're discussing, so she gives him the full F.O. Betts hot air balloon treatment instead. Perhaps he would like his photograph taken in front of the beautiful panorama. Can he believe how pretty the mountains are from this height? Would he like to hear the history of this region? How about an explanation for that bowl-like depression up ahead? Scientists think it's a crater, but she likes to pretend it's a footprint. Maybe he'd appreciate a hot cup of coffee from the thermos. How about a ham biscuit? Did she mention that they also sell videos of the trip? That's right, there's a camera on the bottom of the basket. If he wants, he can buy the video when he gets back to the office and relive the adventure at home whenever he wants, again and again. No, he says, no thank you. The balloon is fully over the mountains now. The sun crests the farthest ridge, its bright rays spilling across the dark canopy in perfect misty light. You should see this, she says. He steps toward her, peers over the edge. What am I looking for exactly? I just see mountains. Okay, she says. Never mind then, it was the mountains. Magnificent hops across her wooden dowel with twiggy feet. The newspaper at the bottom of the cage is crusty with dry shit. Fiona will not let his attitude bother her. She can only do so much to make people happy. If floating 1,000 feet over one of the oldest mountain ranges in the world doesn't give him a thrill, then what will? She pours herself a cup of coffee and does what she always does when the passengers can't seem to appreciate the experience. Pretend to be alone. I'm sorry, he says. It's just that this trip isn't really for me. It's for the bird? No, for someone who couldn't be here. The bird was hers. Ah, Fiona says, and understands completely. She gets this sometimes. The recently bereaved in search of perspective, in search of meaning. Directly below is Route 91, a two-lane highway that connects with the parkway. She points, thinking that large things made small might make him feel more powerful or important or significant, though it can have the opposite effect too, depending on your mood. You can feel detached. The earth can appear all at once distant and vast, like all of it was made for something, but not for you. You are not of it. You are separate. Maybe it's how the angels feel, all this creation, this land, this vastness, this lushness, this wildness, this unfolding, all of it for a puny or less deserving collection of organisms. Not that Fiona is a higher form of organism. Not that she believes in angels. She doesn't, or hasn't, since childhood. But sometimes aboveness and belowness are more easily expressed and understood using the older modes. We can now measure the distance to the sun, but all the computers in the world can't tell you what the weather next Tuesday. Can't tell you the weather next Tuesday with 100% accuracy. And why is that? What is it exactly that can't be charted, modeled, known? She is in the wrong mood this morning. The smallness is having the wrong effect on her. She should probably look up instead, but doesn't. The passenger peers over the edge of the basket, lips parted slightly. Together they watch a motorcycle scuttle like a cockroach down the highway. A truck slides like a slug. Her passenger appears to be moved by the smallness, by the aboveness. She fires off the propane again and the balloon lifts them higher. You know, she says, I took a similar trip after my father died last year, and then explains the shape of his ashes when they scattered in the breeze, the way they umbrellaed and then cascaded, the way they disappeared below, how wonderful and heartbreaking that felt. And as she is describing the moment to him, so rich with letting go symbolism, she almost forgets that the story is completely and utterly false, that she has never scattered her father's ashes because her father, F.O. Betts, is still very much alive. Maybe it's the lonely clack of the xylophone, or maybe it's guilt for charging this man so much money for his solo journey, but Fiona wants her passenger to be changed by this hot air balloon ride. She wants him to feel something, even if it means pretending that she scattered her poor father over the side. The passenger removes his glasses, scrubs the lenses with the hem of his shirt. In 5 minutes, she warns him they will begin the descent. With the ascent comes the breakaway, and with the descent, it's like stepping into a pair of heavy, muddy boots after hours of walking around barefoot and free. She finishes her coffee and stows away the cup. When she turns around again, he has the birdcage off the floor of the basket. For a moment, she wonders if he's about to toss it overboard. He presses his lips to the bars and whistles again. Magnificent's tiny square mirror pops loose and disappears somewhere around their feet. The bird is lunging and hopping madly. The man opens the cage door and sticks his hand inside. The bird leaps to a high back corner to avoid him, but he manages to grab hold of her. He brings her out. Magnificent looks uneasy out of the cage. The man kisses the back of her ruffled green head, and Fiona can guess what comes next. Are you sure you want to do this? She asks. Can parakeets even live in the wild? He holds the bird over the edge of the basket and opens his hand to free it. It doesn't explode from his grip the way she expected it might. Instead, it rolls off the end of his fingers. They both move to the edge of the basket and watch it fall, watch it spin, both of them waiting for it to do what birds do. She wills it to flutter and to fight back. What happened, he asks. I lost sight of it. Which way did it go? She points east, uncertainly. I'm pretty sure that way. The man nods. Good, he says. For a split second, I got worried. Her wings were clipped. My daughter never mentioned it, but still. You sure you saw her fly? I'm fairly certain, Fiona says. 30 minutes later, the balloon comes to rest in a park west of town, and not long after that, Tom arrives with the truck. They pack up the balloon and then give the passenger a lift back to his car. What about that video? he asks. Do you think it caught her flying away? I wouldn't mind having a copy of that. Let me check it. She unhooks the small black box from the bottom of the basket and removes the camera. She pushes a button and taps its side. She holds it up to her ear. She pushes another button. Possibly she's overperforming. The man watches with interest. She doesn't know how to explain it, she says, but the machine malfunctioned. Maybe it has a broken sprocket or faulty wiring, or maybe she forgot to press record. She can be that way sometimes, a head full of hot air. Shame, he says, but writes her a check anyway. That night, she visits her father, the real FO, at his apartment, an out-of-the-way building on the north side of town. The view from his second-story balcony is of a suds and rinse. He makes spaghetti with sauce from a can and spins the noodles tight around his fork. He wants a full report on her mother and what's-his-face, his perpetual name for the man Fiona's mother has been seeing for 8 years now, ever since the divorce. Her mother and what's-his-face just got back from a trip to Disney World with what's-his-face's grandkids, Fiona tells him. What's-his-face is now busy constructing a pond in his backyard with a black tarp and a garden hose. What's-his-face knows the scientific names of all the frogs in the southeast, and Fiona's mother finds that adorable. Okay, her father says, I get the picture. They're rinsing dishes now. Between the bristles of the scrub brush, Fiona sees bits of scrambled egg. Her father coughs into his armpit and rubs his nose with the back side of his hand. How's it up there, he asks, and nods up to the ceiling, his usual way of asking about the business and of filling any awkward silence with words. It's so-so. What's eating you? The business is fine, she says, and then tells him about her morning, about Magnificent, about how strange it was to watch a bird fall like that, to see it swallowed up by gravity. She leaves out the part about his ashes. They move to the couch in the den. Her father offers her a peppermint candy from the green dish on the coffee table. He props his feet up, the bottoms of his athletic socks brown and threadbare. Here's the thing, he says. Birds are dying every day. There are probably 1 billion birds in the United States at this very moment. Think about that. You'd think we'd see them drop dead more often. You'd think there'd be bird bodies all over. Where do they all go? Fiona has never really considered it. She tries to imagine not just one bird falling, but 1,000. Then, instead of birds, she imagines people. Her mother, her father, the man with the parakeet, all of them twirling down, featherless, naked. She bites down into her candy. I only saw it happen once, he says. It was a bluebird, I think. Your mom and I were on our way somewhere. Dinner, maybe. It hit the pavement ahead of us. It must have fallen from a long way because it popped right open. It was a mess. Came down over my shoulder. I thought someone had thrown it at me, that it was a joke. I actually looked around to make sure it wasn't. He sucks on his peppermint and reaches for the remote. Their plan is to watch whatever movie is on cable, but Fiona can't stay long. But it was for real, he says. The bird really did fall right out of the sky. Your mom is nervous about it, you know, how she can get. She said it was a bad omen. He flips through the channels, looks forward. What happened next, Fiona asked. Certain there's more to say about this story. I don't remember, he says, distracted. We walked around it, I guess. Thank you.
Writing as laying out a line of words, and the line of words is a miner's pick. You wield it, she says, and it digs a path you follow. No one I've ever read follows her line of words more faithfully than Allison Penning. Her work has a way of tumbling out of itself across the page, so that on first blush, I wondered if her stories weren't one long, uninterrupted pen stroke, one perhaps penning. But Allison's penning is far more woven and layered than a mere stream of consciousness because, in her work, each thought creates the next. She's loyal to one sentence by birthing another out of the first's belly. A creative process that I want to compare, in the spirit of Allison's work, to asexual reproduction, specifically budding, in which the daughter organism begins as a genetic double, literally growing out of her mother's side. Again, in the spirit of Allison's work, I want to imagine mother and daughter sentences. One of the organisms best known for budding, reproducing by budding, is the hydra, a tiny little cnidarian that lives in freshwater, but also, in certain high schools, is a key component of 9th grade biology curriculum. So there I am, in biolab, age 14, reading my regular Dr. Pepper, and watching my wiggly little blue hydra under the microscope when our teacher, Mrs. Schrader, who was infamous for eating worms, tells everyone to try pouring some liquid onto our hydras to see what happens. Go crazy, she says. Now, hydras don't have hearts, but they do have some kind of primitive circulation system, like gastro-circulo-skeleto-dermo all rolled into one or something. Someone can correct me later. And when I put a dot of the Dr. Pepper on my slide, the little pumping bag of goo inside the hydra starts going nuts with the caffeine. And, you know, hydras, like, they have their tentacles kind of waving up above their heads, so the effect of the pumping bag of goo and the reverent antenna is just, it's amazing to behold. It's nearly religious. And this is the way that I have felt this year, reading Allison Penning's her best work, of which there has been so much. Allison is the Dr. Pepper to my little pumping bag of hydrozoan gastrodermis, because what she does, that sentence by sentence honesty, is as thrilling and potent as that instant percolation, as discovering a whole new ecosystem of the self. Whether it's close to the bone fiction about a 27-year-old who bakes pies as mood stabilizer, or an imaginative leap inside the head of a recently returned Afghan war veteran looping a lake in his speedboat to avoid the party in his honor on the shore, Allison has the quality of mind, the depth of heart, the skill of penning to get it right and make it new. Allison.
I wanted to echo Thomas's thanks, but also to thank my mother who's here tonight. I'm going to read a little bit, the start actually, of the story that, that Amanda was talking about the Marine looping around and avoiding his family by staying on the lake. So here we go. This is called Sun's Out, Guns Out. It's early afternoon on the 4th of July, full sun on the deck of the SS Peach Pie. Boyd Pointer, Lance Corporal, United States Marine Corps, stands in the prow of his father's boat, blinks his eyes against the wind. The world's in a jar, Pointer thinks, of Mama's 7-pepper jelly, the kind he ate on his biscuits just this morning, his first day home. It's 95 degrees and humid. It's hot and thick and sticky. But on the lake, you can make your own breeze. The stacks of the power plant fall away on his right. Is it nuclear or nuclear? Pointer's heard it both ways. Once it became a joke, Pointer couldn't remember ever which word of the two was the punchline. The war's here too, but mostly over there for now. Pointer's home from Afghanistan. He wears his plush NASA helmet. He'd had to grab the edges and tear a bit, but the head hole's big enough now. Boyd Pointer went to space camp back in 5th grade. His favorite dehydrated food was strawberry ice cream. His favorite astronaut was, and still is, Michael Collins. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, those guys can go suck a nut. Pointer speaks into the velvet-covered mic attached to his plush NASA space helmet. Houston, come in. He revs the engine, slings the boat around Lake Norman. Swimmers bob here and there, laughing, lying in their noodles like casual IEDs. IEDs can be anywhere, in boats, in baths, on pizza delivery boys, in breast implants, traveling undetected. NTCC, never trust a chicken cutlet. Pointer lifts one arm, silver can in hand. Statue of Liberty, reporting for duty. Houston, come in, Houston. The heat ripples around him like silk. If the boat stops, the silk sticks. Pointer tilts the can and beer streams back, becomes a flame. Pointer lets go of the can and twists to watch his torch fly. He watches as it clears the stern, just missing the girl. The girl is Jules. Jules lounges on her vinyl seat, hands behind her head. With her sunglasses on, it's nearly impossible to tell if she's awake, if she's even alive. Without touching, it's nearly impossible to tell if her breasts are real. He doesn't mind the helmet. That Pointer's used to. He slows the boat down, way down. He zigzags it. "You're wearing your hero suit," his mama always says when they Skype. As if he's 5 and it's a set of those footed pajamas, the ones with rubber on the bottom and a zipper running from neck to ankle. The ones Pointer had worn past the point of too small until the day of his brother's 10th birthday, 10th anniversary Terminator sleepover party, when Hutton pointed at Pointer's crotch and said, "Look at Boyd's teeny tiny junk." Well, look who has teeny junk now, Pointer thinks, passing the dock where his brother sits. He points out of the boat at his brother, flexes a pale bicep. Sun's out, guns out. Pointer's brother points back and lifts his beer. "You," they each seem to be saying to the other. "No, you." Pointer brings his beer to his face and he drinks it. "Physical challenge," his brothers still say. On Family Double Dare, Hunter was the one who found the 3 orange flags hidden in the layers of the giant hamburger. Hutton was the one who found the flags in the snot in the nose. When Pointer's gun was blown from his hands, when he scrambled for it through the blowing sand, when the audience was screaming in his ears, Pointer heard his brother's voice, heard Hunter's voice say, like he'd said when he'd said it on that game show, heard him say, calm and confident, "We'll take the physical challenge." Pointer, in the sand, found his gun and his hands and the trigger. The boat swims into a cove. Pointer takes out his rod and he takes a deep breath, fumbles with the tackle box. It feels good to hold something. Pointer's first cast misfires. He steadies his hands, casts again, takes a deeper breath. He won't catch anything today, that's okay. It's too hot and all the fish are at the bottom, shitting and swallowing each other, swallowing and shitting. The girl, she's still there, says, "What are we fishing for?" "Whatever," Pointer says. "Bluegill, yellow perch, whatever's biting." A few minutes later, the girl says nothing's biting. "We'll try white bass," Pointer says, and sips his beer. He doesn't change his lure, though, just casts again. "Red eye," he says. "Greenfin." He's Dr. Seussing. 1 fish, 2 fish. He's always thought it might be fun to write a dirty Dr. Seuss. Hop on pop, hop on top, don't stop, won't stop, 1 fish, 2 fish, red night, blue balls. He takes a long sip and looks at the girl. She'd been so much more interesting last night at the bar. He casts again, says, "Purple feather tail." Finally, she stops him, adjusts her black bikini top, and says, "Now you're shitting me." "Yes, ma'am, I am," Pointer says. "Thought you were asleep back there." "I'm not tired," the girl says to him. Last night, they went from the bar back to her place. He'd run into her there at the bar where she works. She'd recognized him, had remembered his name. Pointer made her crawl on her belly. "It's all in good fun," she said. When they finished, he lay, stomach down, reading his texts on her bed. He was supposed to drive straight home to the lake house. He was home. His family was waiting. The girl, Jules, lay down on top of his back. He thought she might want feats of strength, that she'd make him do push-ups. Instead, like a line from a dream, she just kissed his ear and said, "At ease." Pointer stands at attention, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, waiting on a nibble, drinking from his beer. He can feel her eyes behind her lenses, going up and down his side, over the skull tattoo that's wearing a helmet, over the American flag on his shoulder, over the 9 planets colored in along his spine. It had been hard for him to pick whether to have Mercury near his head or near his waistband. Pointer's blonde, though. That had decided it. His head is the sun. That's a metaphor, an ex-girlfriend told him. Mr. Center of the Universe. Mr. Universe, Pointer flexes his pecs. Mary's violet eyes make John sit up nights, pining. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. My very eager member jumps straight up Nora's pussy. Except Pluto no longer exists. Or its gravity is too small. Something. On Pointer's little red Mars, there's a small creature, a rabbit. Hey, pardon me, Doc, the rabbit says, but could you rent me a you-drive-em flying saucer? I gotta get back to the oith. And Marvin the Martian says, Earth. Oh, the Earth. We'll be gone in just a few seconds. There's about to be, the Martian says, an earth-shattering kaboom. Pointer throws his can in the water and belches. The can is a flashbang. The fish, disoriented, will float to the surface. Maybe a purple feathertail. Maybe the purple feathertail, if it comes, will be an IED in disguise, kaboom, kaboom. The girl is moving. She's getting up. Pointer sticks his rod in the pro-anchor rod holder. He opens the cooler. Want one? He says. Yeah, I want one. He tosses, and the girl can catch. She takes the cold beer, slowly rolls the can down her shoulders. She shakes it up and pops it open, and it spurts out of her hand, pale and fizzy and strong. She walks up to Pointer, stands near him, doesn't touch, takes off her sunglasses, hangs them from the little string between her unreal, real breasts. She sips what's left of her beer. The girl twists the wire mic of the plush NASA space helmet, sticks it in her mouth. His plush NASA space helmet is in her mouth. Her hands are retying the top tie of her swimsuit, or are they untying? What are you doing? Pointer says. Her lips around the tip of the mic. The girl says, what do you think I'm doing? She slides the mic into her mouth. Her face moves closer to his. What do you think you're doing? Pointer says again, because he feels like an idiot. He feels like an echo, trapped in a box on a boat. The girl moves her lips up and down on the mic, her eyes looking for his. She reaches for the waistband of his shorts. She's just another dumb fish on a worm. And Pointer closes his eyes, and he tries to be interested in this fish, tries to be the worm that wants to get caught. She's touching him, but his anger rises like a limb instead, and it says aloud, don't touch me. The girl pulls her hands out, lifts them up, and backs away. Pointer tosses his helmet in the prow of the boat, wipes his hair down, wipes his face. Pointer presses the skin on his chest. He says, I think I'm sunburnt. He picks up the rod, sends out another cast. You're not catching anything, she says, finally. She sits back in her seat, sunglasses on again. What's wrong with you? I mean, respectfully, Captain. Lance Corporal, Pointer corrects. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. In a story I recently turned in for workshop, I had one of the main characters work as a pig stunner in a hog slaughtering facility in Covington, Virginia. George's comments to me, as ever, were precise, thoughtful, and encouraging. But what will stick with me was the P.S. at the bottom of the letter, where he wrote, I didn't know there was a meatpacking plant in Covington, just that smelly Meade Westco paper plant. Please include the farty smell that plant makes. George is a writer that lives and walks and catalogs the world. This notation of the geography and industry of Covington and the farty smell of a paper plant is typical of George's grasp on the richness and complexity of a narrated experience. But he also dives headfirst into the absurd, the magical, the not quite possible, venturing into tales of retired superheroes, an Airstream trailer casino called Liza's Luck, and a boy with an aggressive flesh-eating disease who makes a miraculous recovery, in order to recast how we understand mercy, faith, and the commitments we carry to one another. In life, George honors these commitments to his family, his friends, and his fellow writers. He wants to send you the exact perfect web link for you at the exact moment you need it. And I have been endlessly cheered by receiving links from George tailored to my personal interests, mostly contemporary feminism and the bluegrass banjo. He helped me find housing in Charlottesville when I still lived far away, has given me countless rides in his Jeep, dropped off papers for me when I was short on time, and generally been someone all of us first years could count on for support and guidance, and for that he deserves a major thank you. But more than this, George is a model literary citizen, creating the literary community he wants to live in. He buys the books, reads the stories, tweets the tweets, goes to the conferences, reps the program, makes the spreadsheets. He sits at his table in Millie Jo's day after day. He does the work, word by word by word by word. Literary advice columnist Dear Sugar wrote, "The gulf between writerly creation and commerce is so tremendously wide that it's sometimes impossible not to feel annihilated by it. But the writers who don't give up are the people who find a way to believe in abundance rather than in scarcity. They've taken into their hearts the idea that there is enough for all of us, that success will manifest itself in different ways for different sorts of artists, that keeping the faith is more important than cashing the check." I feel strongly that George has taken into his heart this idea of abundance rather than scarcity. When George likes a story, his enthusiasm for the core of that story is impossible to contain. He gives admiration and compliments freely. It's my sincerest wish that not long from now, George will get to cash the check, but I know no matter what, he will keep the faith.
Thank you. I could really use that check. I also want to thank the faculty and friends and neighbors who've shown up, and 2 of my students. You're getting A's. And I'm going to try to look like I know what I'm doing. This is just a portion of chapter 1 of a novel in progress, whose title I will not share yet because Chris wrote it was lousy.
Zing!
Amidst the competing smells of sticky buns and personal pan pizzas, there was a larger battle being waged at Gate 35 in Terminal B of Dulles International Airport. Joseph Case watched in earnest, trying to discern if the warring parties were ninjas or robots. Joseph assumed the little boys were brothers, probably in the neighborhood of 8 and 6. The older one drew 2 invisible swords with lightsaber hum. Joseph, a younger brother himself, was happy to see the little one knew to keep his distance. The smaller boy answered with throwing stars and a seeming infinite supply until eventually they turned into the pew-pew of a laser cannon. Joseph was grateful for the diversion. He'd been sitting at Gate 35 for hours, ever since he'd left his parents' place around 2 o'clock, having lied about going to the gym and then to dinner with a movie and friends. The woman at the gate desk announced they would soon begin boarding Flight 923 non-stop to São Paulo. Joseph rifled through his backpack for one last check of his belongings. Easy enough, he'd only packed 3 days' worth of clothing. He rearranged an extra pair of jeans and the misshapen pile of shirts to cover the $9,000 lining the bottom of his backpack. He pretended to tie his shoes, feeling for the Ziploc bags he shoved into his socks, each containing another $500. And lastly, Joseph checked his wallet for the photograph. There was nothing new to be gleaned from it. The man and his family were still in it, still celebrating, smiling and laughing at the camera. Joseph slid the photo back into its sleeve, next to a piece of paper with what he hoped was the family's last known address. Joseph guessed he'd be somewhere over the Caribbean before his parents started to worry. It was hard to know how his mother and brother would react, but the if-then logic of his father's thinking was easier to guess. Clear as code, as Professor Ratnaraja used to say. His father would check Kate's Consulting's secure data servers first. When he found the Logisop source code was missing, he would then check the subsidiary's accounts, only to find the money too was gone. And by then, however, Joseph would already have landed in Brazil and be on his way. A plump woman seated across from Joseph looked up from a paperback betraying the first creases of an airport purchase. Joseph recognized something passed between the boys, the silent signals brothers employed whenever the specter of parental intervention loomed and the stakes were high. For the ultra-mega championship of the universe, for example, or for the fate of entire planets. Without skipping a beat, the boys tempered their acrobatics, eschewing roundhouse kicks for the simplicity of energy blasts, issuing their threats and war cries in ferocious pantomime. Their mother tugged at the cuffs of her lavender Disney World sweatshirt and returned to her book, and the battle raged on at a whisper. Joseph could remember the idea of playing with his older brother Marcus, as these boys did, but he couldn't recall a specific moment, a birthday party or a day in the park. It was all a collage. Thinking of Marcus led to the same place it had for the last 2 months, back to the accident, a memory that seemed to have expanded to such size it was impossible to see around it to any other part of his 22 years, a memory that pried its way past prescriptions, the therapist's advice, and attorney's counsel. Joseph looked away to the TV mounted on the wall to distract himself. The news channel asked this question in swirling 3D letters, "War with Iraq?" Joseph was too far to read the successive blooms of closed captioning. The broadcast cut to another feed, this one in the sickly phosphorescence of a night vision lens. The camera panned left, taking in armored personnel carriers lined up in neat rows along the Kuwaiti border. Their pugnacious snouts and mounted guns pointed at the flat expanse of Iraq on the other side. It was strange to watch a war start. Would there be some sort of signal? Joseph half expected to see a Marine strolling along that line in the sand with a starting pistol raised. The two boys fell in front of Joseph in a storm of limbs. Older brother landed his sword, or photon spear, in the younger's ribs, breaking the brokered silence. Evisceration was one thing, but tickling a fate far worse. Joseph shut his eyes to the scene. It was ridiculous that tickling should inspire such panic, but there was no avoiding the memory this time. So Joseph gave in to the advice of Dr. Kalbfeld, who had told him not to suppress it. As the ninja robots were wrenched apart by their mother and flung gasping and grinning into the seats on either side of her, Joseph continued staring at the carpet, allowing the memory to rise to the surface. Marcus had driven down to Charlottesville after New Year's to help Joseph pack for the move back home to Northern Virginia. After graduating in May with his friends, Joseph stuck around at Professor Ratnaraja's behest, refining and testing the logistics software he'd written for his computer science thesis. At semester's end, Ratnaraja offered to keep Joseph on even longer, but he declined. Marcus had finagled a promise from their father that he would allow them to start their own subsidiary of Kate's Consulting, LLC, and with that miracle program of years front and center, Marcus said. After sweeping the house clean, the brothers Cates parked the packed U-Haul at a motel and headed out for dinner at the Dow Lounge. Despite the name, there was no pretense toward anything even vaguely Asian. The fare remained ardently all-American, greasy spoon concoctions perfect for sopping up alcohol in the bloodstream or staving off its effects long enough to allow for more. That night had followed on the heels of one of those unseasonable, but not altogether rare 60-something degree January days when a stray gust of warm Gulf air gets trapped against the cupped palm of the Blue Ridge. The Dow Lounge had even opened the tiki bar in the backyard, and people were milling about like it was summer again. The sun had long since set, and the temperature was dropping again, but groups of people in short sleeves huddled together, sipping their beers and shivering in defiant optimism. Not 5 minutes into their arrival, Marcus recognized someone at the bar, and Joseph left once the high-fiving started. He was too hungry and tired to watch the Marcus show. He grabbed a beer and a burger and then ran the maze of the packed narrow halls toward the yard and took a seat at one of the wooden picnic tables. When he finished his food, Joseph set the rest of his fries aside and spent 10 minutes looking for his brother before he found Marcus sitting at the tiki bar, his arm draped across the back of some girl's chair. "There you are," Joseph said, clapping his hand against his brother's back. The girl turned and Joseph saw it was his housemate, Lexi. Marcus turned, lips loosely pulled into a smirk, tipsy already, unbelievably. "Joey, I've been looking all over for you." Was this where things went off course? Later, during the sleepless nights of the months afterward, when doubts scurried in his brain like mice, Joseph wondered, would things have turned out differently if Marcus hadn't set his sights on Lexi Soren? Joseph fired a wide-eyed stare at Lexi over his brother's head. She answered with a roll of those ice-blue Danish eyes and that wide megawatt smile. She mouthed, "It's okay." Joseph turned to his brother. "I see you've met my roommate, Alexandra Soren," Marcus said, too loudly. "Great name." "Lexi," she said. "Also a great name," Marcus said. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Joseph hooked his arm under Marcus's armpit and dragged him off the rattan bar stool. "What's up, little bro?" Marcus asked. "Can we call it a night?" Joseph said. "It's early," Marcus said. "Come on, I'll get you a drink." Joseph caught his brother's arm. "What are you doing?" "What do you mean?" Marcus said. "We're celebrating." He let out a loud hoot. People in the yard turned at the sound, and Joseph tried to ignore them, but felt a hot flush in his cheeks under their scrutiny, which only made him clamp down harder on Marcus's arm. "No, seriously, what are you doing?" "Ow! I am serious," Marcus said, his expression collapsing into a frown. He actually looked hurt. "Joey, that titty you wrote is going to make us rich." Marcus put a hand to his mouth, stifling a burp, and Joseph took a step back. "Sorry," Marcus said. "Diddy, not titty." "To consulting Kate's legit..." "No, that's not..." Joseph got in his brother's face. "You're all over Lex." "Whoa, Joe, I'm not all over her." Marcus's fingers continued hovering in midair, recklessly taking everything into his air quotes. "It's okay, Joe. Stop worrying." Marcus punched Joseph lightly in the shoulder and ambled back to the tiki bar, struggling with the uneven terrain of the yard. Joseph followed him and took up sentry behind Lexi. While Marcus ordered shots, Joseph asked, "Are you sure you're okay? I'm really sorry about him." She waved the question away and told him she could handle it. "I can't watch this. I'll be over there if you need me," she said. Lexi laughed and put a hand on his chest. "I'll send up a signal flare." And so Joseph took his place back at the picnic table and watched as Marcus put his hand on Lexi's shoulder and she shrugged it off. No doubt Marcus had committed a few strategic errors, but ultimately it was an intelligence failure. Lexi's preternatural tolerance was legion. On one of the rare occasions they'd gone out together to a Halloween party near campus, Joseph personally witnessed Lexi knock back 20 shots of bottom-shelf Stolichnaya and still walk her 5'6" self home without so much as a stumble. In fact, Joseph had to lean on her on the way home that night. The roads were completely empty when they left, sometime after 2 a.m. The traffic lights on Main blinked red, and Joseph rolled down the windows despite the now chilled air, trying to clear out the fog of alcohol and cologne rolling off Marcus as he started in on the computer genius jag again. "Little bro," Marcus said. "I'm not kidding. That shit you wrote is going to make us a lot of money. Dad's already been talking up his friends at DOD, and they are plenty interested. You know, with all this shit going down." He gestured at the windshield as if it were the only barrier between them and chaos. "It won't be ready for a long time," Joseph said. "Anyway, whatever. We prove ourselves with this, and Dad's going to give us our own..." "You said he already agreed to the subsidiary," Joseph said. "Yeah, just a short while working for him, then bam, me on accounts, you on development, our own company. This could be big. Military, cargo, I mean, we're talking FedEx, UPS, fucking giganto companies." Joseph nodded, hoping that agreeing with his brother might shut him up. "When did you get so smart?" Marcus said, poking Joseph in the side, driving his thumb between his ribs. "Cut it out," Joseph shouted. Marcus cackled. "Maybe brains skip a generation." He jabbed again, causing Joseph to jerk the wheel. Marcus's head slapped against the passenger window and he laughed even more. "Stop it, what the fuck?" Marcus stared at Joseph for a moment, but his shock quickly dissolved into giggling again. "Uh-oh, Joey's mad." Joseph felt an old anger sprout in his chest, ashamed his brother could still get under his skin so easily, and Joseph sped up. He just wanted to get back to the motel, free of the same small space as his brother. He would ask if there was another room available. "Turbo thrusters!" Marcus shouted, making a show of being pressed into his seat. He turned and tried to poke Joseph again. "Oh, come on, Joe, don't be mad." The pilot announced over the speaker that they were looking forward to a tailwind before telling the flight staff to prepare for takeoff. Joseph pulled the in-flight magazine free from its pouch. He saw someone had penciled in 3 answers to the crossword before giving up. A grain of logic rubbed against Joseph's thinking over and over in his sleep, his waking hours, any moment of quiet, including now. If he had stopped his brother from hitting on Lexi, Marcus wouldn't have been filled up to his eyeballs with cheap vodka. Sure, Joseph might still have had to drive them home, but in all likelihood he wouldn't have had to fend off a tickle attack from his pickled sibling. The possibility taunted him from behind his tired eyes. It whispered in his brain. The weight of takeoff pressed against his chest. As the plane left the runway, Joseph watched the winking lights of Northern Virginia, its broad plains of parking lots and cul-de-sac arabesques fall away. The pressure popped in his ears. But Marcus did lean over to tickle Joseph while he was driving, and Joseph rose to the bait and turned to shout at his older brother and swat his hand away, which was why, Joseph concluded time and again, he didn't see the dark spot 20 feet ahead in the middle of the road. Marcus put his hands up in surrender, and Joseph turned back to the road just as the car's headlights resolved the shadow into the shape of a man crawling across the asphalt on his hands and knees. Thank you.
Thank you, George. My first meeting with Freeman was at a cafe in the corner. This was the first day of workshop in the fall of 2012, and it was about 30 to 45 minutes before the workshop was to begin. It was on a Monday, and it was my first Monday in America. Freeman invited me for a little chit-chat before the workshop, and I was still very jet-lagged from 2 days of traveling from my home country. And Freeman told me, the most basic things anyone would ever tell anyone. First of all, he told me, he said, don't sweat it. He said, when I first came, I was quite as clueless as you are. So just relax, and before you know it, you'll get a hang of it. That was 9 months ago. And my impression of Freeman has pretty much not changed. He is one of the most selfless, most down-to-earth, most sincere people you ever meet. He brings a unique dimension of humor to his stories, and this humor, this special brand of humor Freeman brings to his stories, they really don't take away from the brilliance of his plots, and his subject matters. His subject matters are varied, they vary from the Belizean underworld to a stay-at-home dad who is struggling with little children in the house, and even classroom dynamics between 8-year-olds. His characters are a delight to follow. Their problems rattle you to the point where you're wailing with laughter and with tears at the same time, be they a group of young black kids depressed at the demolition of their playhouse, or a young woman determined to catch the thieves stealing her chicken with a shotgun, or 2 grown men going on a hike in search of relief from the stress of daily living. Freeman's characters are intense and persuasive. He offers insights and suggestions in workshops that are so unique and so different that I wouldn't even dare. I remember one of our workshops where he suggested as an improvement to an accident scene in one of our colleagues' short stories, and Freeman suggested that one of the cars, which was a truck, he suggested that perhaps it would be better to have this truck actually fly over the head of the smaller car, which was a saloon car, and scrape off the roof of the smaller car, and then leave the 2 passengers of the smaller car seated within the car, pretty much unharmed, but with a new idea of what an accident could be. So that's the Freeman I knew. He's such a good heart, and he believes in the fact that the world can be so much more of a less painful place. I won't take much of your time, but in one written comment in a short story I submitted for the workshop, Freeman wrote that
I think of brotherhood as one of the most sacred things on earth. What your story seems to imply is worthless, that it's not worth fighting for. This world of your character seems impossible. I'm too big of a softie to want this much hurt in the story. Now, after I read this, I actually had to sit back and evaluate my sadist tendencies. Much worse, a supposedly young novel female. Now, before I call Freeman up, I'll end by saying that Alfred Hitchcock, when he was asked what a story is, he said a story is life with a dull part sticking out. And I would add that a great story is life, but with the dull parts remade into something sublime, something more passionate. And they are written by great writers. And it doesn't matter if this writer rides a bicycle all over Charlottesville and he hikes up one leg of his pants higher than the other. Yes. This writer, he is never too busy, never too lost in his own problems to share a smile with everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, it might not take much longer before we have to line up for autographs from this writer. I call him Freeman.
Thanks so much, Amelia. Okay, so yeah, first I just want to thank the faculty and thank my fellow writers, and I mean, Thomas, you did a wonderful job, so I just want to ditto. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for these 2 years. It's been unbelievable. So I'm going to read sort of the end of a story, and all you need to know, well, there's just a couple of characters. There's Dwayne and his sidekick Roy. They're like local kind of gambler, hustler types. Dwayne's mother's very sick, so he's sort of dealing with that. But their friend Big Henry, he was once an athlete, but now he's grown obese and he needs an electric wheelchair to get around. And unfortunately, Dwayne and Roy have accidentally insulted him by laughing at his idea of putting a sound system on his wheelchair. So to make it up to him, they've got this scheme going to get the whole neighborhood behind them. So I'll get started. It's Saturday and the neighborhood is brimming. Dwayne stands on top of an Escalade announcing the event. His voice has taken over. It's like an Easter service. The people are mesmerized. So when Roy slides by with the donation bucket, their loose change and small bills rattle and flutter in. Away goes Dwayne's voice. Place your bets. These boys are putting it on the line for you. They're risking it all on the field of battle. They're running the gauntlet, folks. Is today their day to win or lose? They're doing it for this street, each and every soul on this street. In lane number 1, weighing in at a massive 318 pounds, that's more than his noble steed, the turbocharged GE rocket chair, second fastest motorized wheelchair on the market. Bad knees aren't enough to stop this juggernaut. He's not just any giant, he's our giant, Big Henry. And the spring-coiled competitor in lane number 2 floats in just under $1.25, $1.50 if you throw in those wheels and pedals. This boy is as light as a feather and built for speed. Don't let him fool you with those jerky steps. Just look at that sly smile. You all know the sidewalk poet for his wily words, but he's a lightning bolt on 2 wheels. Give it up for Crook Jake. Woo! Yeah! The 2 contestants are lined up at the park entrance. Crook Jake stands over his bicycle's crossbar, grinning, his helmet shining hot in the sun. Big Henry eases himself in his seat, the whole slab of his hand gripping the wheelchair joystick like an airplane throttle. Gentlemen, we want a clean race.
Here we revisit the age-old battle between man with machine and machine man. You will race the length of 5th Street and back, from right here at the park entrance up the hill to the liquor store on Main and back down across the same line to the finish. Now I'm going to just read off a couple of rules, so listen up. There will be no shortcutting, no wheel rigging, no battery swiping, no tire flattening, no brake line cutting. There will be no propulsion assistance through the use of sails, boosters, or rockets. There will be no pushing, slapping, biting, nipple twisting, or flashing, though mooning is encouraged. Otherwise, this competition is a wide open affair. The contestants have agreed upon the terms. You, the audience, have chosen your champion. Now only you can make sure your champion wins. What's it going to take? They are running the gauntlet, and the gauntlet is you. So ready or not, we will start only after and not a moment before the sound of the... Roy pounds the horn of the Escalade, lets it sing out long and grating harsh. And they're off! The sun is still high above the black webbing of electrical wires. The texts and calls, tweets and Facebook messages have gone out. All of 5th Street is in attendance. Those who left the park are on porches on top of the cars lining the street. The little grassy spots out in front of homes have chairs and blankets and people. Those with houses right on the sidewalk hang out of their second-story windows. Old and young line the sidewalks, cheering. Big Henry, with the instant torque of his wheelchair's electric motor, has slammed his tiny joystick throttle forward, knocking himself back into his seat and blasting off to a quick lead. Moments later, though, a lady leans out her second-floor window and empties a bucket of some sort of white powder. The cloud drops down like a ghost and envelops Big Henry. He's spluttering and coughing and temporarily blinded. He swerves and clips a telephone pole and shudders to a stop. Here comes Crook Jake. It takes him a minute to get rolling on account of his cerebral palsy, especially uphill. He can barely walk, but when he gets that bicycle under him, it's a beautiful thing. It's as if his knees were bent specially to rest his feet on those pedals. Here he comes with his shiny silver helmet. He's getting his speed up. The flour keeps coming. The lady must be emptying her cupboards. But the deaf girl is out in the street. She's got Big Henry's face brushed off, got him seeing again. She's thrown some goggles on that big old head of his, and he slams the joystick back full ahead, weaves back to straight, a little cloud trailing him. Crook Jake comes into range for the boys in that treehouse that's really just a pallet wedged in the bend of a tree with a tarp over it. They've got a box of tomatoes and good arms. That boy with the stutter tags the side of Crook Jake's helmet, and he's swerving. Topples right into Melvin, who's standing there hollering for Crook Jake to go faster. Melvin gets him going again, both of them splattered with tomato gore. Those boys have tatted up the side of Big Henry's chair too, but he keeps chugging. The boys are out of tomatoes now, and the kids are out in the street. They're running alongside, the two racers barely outstripping the giggling, screaming pack. The lady who's afraid of everything is up on her porch with her husband. She must be feeling brave. I'm sorry, she's on the porch roof with her husband. She must be feeling brave. A stout-looking rope winds around her waist and trails off through the window. "Tied her off to the toilet bowl," her husband hollers down proudly. He's holding up a donut box, and she's taking out donuts, and she's got a pretty good arm too. All of a sudden, the racers are doing their damnedest to get here. She lands one in Big Henry's lap, and he bellows out a whoop. The husband opens a fresh box, and she's raining them down amongst the kids, and they're catching them. Crook Jake has one balanced in his underbite, eating with no hands. The people up at the new apartment complex are rolling empty trash cans down the center of the street. It's an avalanche of trash cans. Crook Jake nimbly navigates them, zigging and zagging, while Big Henry doesn't even slow down. He plows right through them, up over the last little rise to the tracks. The racers are neck and neck. The porch sitters are hollering for Big Henry to cut him off. The counter cheer of "Crooked Jake! Crooked Jake!" sings out, and the biker pulls just a smidge ahead as they pass the impound lot, bump over the train tracks, and careen into the liquor store parking lot. Nobody knows exactly where the turnaround is supposed to be, so Crook Jake tries to pull a quick U-turn at the lot's entrance.
But the people by the store won't have it. They switch their tune to Crooked Crook. So he straightens his bike back out and goes all the way to the liquor store door. Damn near goes through it. Meanwhile, Big Henry tries to cheat too. Whips his chariot around short, turns so tight he almost tips. But the crowd starts squalling, throwing their bodies in his way. Big Henry grumble shouts for them to clear out and finally pushes through. Ding, 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 ding. The railroad arms are going, blinking red and dropping down, and Big Henry zooms out of the parking lot ahead again, leaning way back to zip under the arm as it drops. Crook Jake has to swing around the arm, and everyone sees him, his eyes going big. But there's no train. Someone has rigged the wiring on the arm and is doubled over by the control box, laugh wheezing their breath out. Bumping over the tracks, Crook Jake leans forward, pedaling his paltry legs for all they're worth. It's downhill now. It's all about speed. The watchers have cleared everything out of the way. The crowd tightens around the park entrance. Big Henry is in the lead, his chair maxed out. But then something is wrong. As he nears Dice Street, he seems to be slowing. How much longer can his battery last? The road steepens. Crook Jake is closing in on him, working hard. The people hollering, "Crooked Jake!" waving and laughing and running after them. This is as fast as his feet will go, so he tucks his silver helmet down, knifing through the air. Big Henry is past Dice Street, rushing through the crowd of kids. He throws his chair into neutral and lets the weight do the work. Shooting down the street, wheels whirring. The crowd is pumping arms and leaning on car horns and waving bright-colored towels in the air and hollering, hollering, hollering. The final stretch, they're shoulder to shoulder. Crook Jake, his silver helmet and bright underbite leaning into the wind, leaning toward the glory. Big Henry tilted way back in his chair, goggle-eyed, as if he were in his lazy boy, as if he were limboing under the wind, as if he were sliding into home plate. It's not clear what happens at this point. Maybe something bumps Big Henry's steering arm. Maybe something seizes up in the rocket chair or gets caught in the wheels. But whatever it is, entering the last 50 feet, Big Henry's chair jerks to the side and clips Crook Jake. The bike spasms and the front wheel twists, and Crook Jake jerks the handlebars, then overcorrects. His front wheel locks and he launches over the handlebars, flying stretched out like he's been shot out of a cannon with his eyes all wide and his arms tucked at his side. His bike collapsing, clattering and skidding horribly on the pavement, and Crook Jake belly flops like a bright-scaled fish into Big Henry's lap, and they cross into the park. Dwayne's voice is hoarse, hollering, "Have you ever seen anything like it, folks? Have you ever seen anything like it?" That night, the clouds blow in and the drizzle sings down. The street is dark and quiet, with rings of light beneath the scattered street lamps. Dwayne and Roy are out on their porch listening to the hush. Sure, they bet on the race. Yeah, they picked their winners and wagered everything on them. But since the race, there's been something unfamiliar in the air. Something different from winning, maybe better. Dwayne takes his phone out of his pocket and then puts it back. He hopes someone thought to tell his mama about the race. Roy is the first to see Big Henry, coming around the cottages and rolling up the street. Roy almost calls out, but then he hears the music. Hears the funk-heavy bass, the drums kicking way back and mixing it up, the guitar leaning all forward into the riff, and someone is beating the hell out of a cowbell. There's a dozen background singers, an entire chorus, trumpets screaming, saxes grooving, and there's a deep, torn voice rising out of the mix, Big Henry's voice. The dark hood of his poncho leaning out over his face, the two speakers mounted behind his shoulders. The music blasts Big Henry a path through the rain. Beneath the street lamp across the way, he turns the chair into a tight spin around the ring of lamplight. The volume rising for Dwayne and Roy as the speakers sweep past, then falling again as Big Henry pirouettes off into the drizzle, escorting his song through the night. Thanks.
I told Freeman that realistically, Jake probably wins that race handily, but telerealism. What do I know about Gina Waldorf? I know she scares the shit out of me. And what specifically about her scares the shit out of me? Hard to say, but it could be those eyes, those perpetually investigating eyes. They startled me right off the bat, back in August. We had just finished the first program meeting of the year, wherein Chris welcomed the newcomers and Barbara assured us that no issue was too small, no question too stupid. Contentions I have since emphatically disproven. We all headed to the corner for a late afternoon cocktail. At some point during the migration, Gina disappeared, and about 40 minutes later reappeared in the seat next to mine at number 3. She was sweaty and a little short of breath. She had decided to go running while the rest of us got a drink. In the 10 or so minutes we spoke, we discovered some common ground. Divorced parents, step-families, complicated holiday seasons, the kinds of life details that can fling people irretrievably towards a writing life. And the whole time, while my eyes darted nervously from surface to surface, hers, wide and bright, stayed fixed, as though she knew there was more to me than what I was telling, and that if she kept looking, something unseen would emerge. What's she doing, I thought. Knock it off. I imagine Gina's characters experience a similar kind of discomfort. The people who inhabit her stories are hugely varied and closely scrutinized. In my year of working with her, I've met all sorts. A father who effortlessly connects with his teenage daughter while his professional life comes apart. 2 completely reimagined Disney princesses. A barista who in his spare time is a high-octane voyeur. These are not simple or easy to work with characters, but in every instance, regardless of how much Gina may or may not have in common with them, they each receive an enormous dose of attention and empathy. So much so that as a reader, once you've finished one of her stories, it can be jarring to realize how invested you were in someone you perhaps weren't even supposed to like. For me, this effect was especially potent in Gina's last workshop story of the year, a family drama entitled Natural Disasters. In this haymaker of a tale, the reader is shown 2 conflicting and persuasive forces. On one side we have Carolyn, the matriarch of a family on Christmas vacation in Hawaii, and on the other we have Evie, a troubled young loner who was invited along by Carolyn's son, a longtime friend. Carolyn is annoying. Carolyn is mean. Carolyn is a sheltered simpleton from the upper Midwest who fears Evie's potential influence over her son and has no trouble passing harsh judgment on this intruder. Carolyn is someone you'd never want to meet, yet it is in her head that the narrative resides. The sheer ballsiness of this decision on Gina's part cannot be overstated. It would have been easier by a factor of 10 to write from Evie's point of view. Evie is emotionally injured, without a family of her own, alone in the world. We are naturally inclined to like and side with her. We wish we could keep her company. We expect to, but Gina does not play to our expectations. With amazing insight and humor, she gives us a beeline into Carolyn's mind, familiarizes us with her ridiculous voice and rationale, and, against all odds, she makes us see things Carolyn's way, if only for the duration of the story. I came away from Natural Disasters feeling, as Emily Dickinson said one should feel when confronted with great art, as if the top of my head had been taken off. And while it was off, something wonderful was poured in, a terrifying and frequently ignored truth, that all of us live and love in different ways, and in trying to make ourselves understood, we often achieve the opposite effect, and find ourselves farther apart than before. But, as Carolyn reminds us, we keep trying. We have to. That is what finally sustains us. Let me make sure I am not misunderstood. I will miss you, Gina. I will miss your conviction, which pervades both your fiction and your commentary, and which I admire more than I can say. I will miss your penchant for bad jokes and puns, which, I reluctantly admit, rivals and at times exceeds my own. I will miss dropping you off at Creasap Road every Monday after workshop and watching you disappear into that world where you create your stunning scenes and characters. It makes me happy to know that it won't be long before we see your work out in the real world, but I want to see you there too. If you need a ride, my shotgun seat is always open. Gina Waldorf.
Hello. It's my honor to close it out, as Maddie said last year, by virtue of alphabetical order. I'm going to intro this by saying I wrote it, or I began to write it 2 years ago, before I came to this program, when I had a chip on my shoulder the size of Nevada. And I finished it just recently. I finally put an ending on it, and it's like Delaware now. It's really awesome. stopped where the woods opened up beside the highway. It had been a rest area once, but the his and hers bathroom shack was locked. "I'm tired, I got nothing left," said Sonny, limping all melodramatic through candy bar wrappers and gas station coffee cups. "Somebody else take point, I can't do it no more." Nobody offered. The route got more and more dangerous every year, and we could remember a lot of years, even if we weren't the old guard. The old guard were dead, all dead. They were displays in cold little museums that nobody visited, photos and albums nobody looked at. "Come on, baby," said Hans. "Come on, you can do it." I thought, sure you'd say that, you rotten coward. Sonny was his windbreak, his shield. "You gotta do it, baby. Your point every year. You're the best. Come on." She sagged and sat in the dirt. The bottom of her would have kicked up dust, but snow had already feathered the ground. Everything was wet and gray. Everything was tired, like us. I went to Obi and said, "Jesus, don't let's all celebrate at once, huh?" Thinking, I'm gonna lighten up the mood. Obi was having a snack by a picnic table, turned upside down in the brush. She didn't even look at me. It was too delicious, her snack. She gobbled it down in a way that was sort of disgusting, like it was her last meal. And maybe it was. Hell, up north was just business. We all understood that. We understood it like you understood what you're made for. We understand it like you understand an itch in your leg. You got an itch on your leg, you scratch it. Except this was an itch in the brain. So what? They're not the best brains. So what? Will never fit in at a show for the prettiest, the brightest, the most popular? I mean, so what? How's that justify laying in wait for us? It's a hard life and we're just trying to make it. How's it okay to set up ambushes by the highways in case we come that direction? "Look," I said, "Obi, look, it'll be all right." She ate, seriously disgusted, food dribbling out of her mouth and onto the ground. "Look," I said, "we're almost halfway. The rain will clear up real soon, you'll see." She flapped on one side and shook some water at me. She flapped the other side so it wouldn't seem personal. "Leave her alone," Bone said. Bone was the closest thing I had to a friend, but he was a loser. I was a loser too, but I didn't want to be. Bone didn't seem to care if he was or he wasn't. I went and stood where Bone was, closer to the roadside. "This is pathetic," I told him, looking the gang over. "We look fucking mangy, Bone. We look like we've lost a war." Bone laughed. "We have." "So what?" I kicked mud. Bone wasn't a loser because he was old. He wasn't a loser because he'd seen more violence than all of us combined and had the scars to prove it. Ugly didn't make a loser, and neither did sadness, which hung all around Bone, hung around all of us. "We are without a nation now," Bone said. "We are traveling with only the vaguest of destinations." It took me a long time to figure out that what made Bone a loser was that he always told the truth. Bone looked at the awful gray sky like it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. They call us a menace. They call us vandals. They say we do nothing but perpetuate ourselves, and they've created an order where that is the truth. That is a war we have lost, my friend. He looked at me then, looked at me like a friend. So why do we keep fighting? His question hung there too long. I was actually thinking about it. I rolled my eyes, hissed a laugh, and walked away to do a crack in the high grass. I cracked leisurely, because nobody showed any signs of taking off. Sweet machines, I thought. Check out all those sweet machines, and I laughed, low in my belly. They'd had it, those machines. They creaked when they moved, and they had to move. We had to move. We had to be moving all the time, because Bone was right. We were done, but we weren't finished. I took my time because I could see everybody, and they couldn't see me in high grass. I could see how Stein kept Falabella warm with his extra padding. She was his, he was hers. That was something. I could see KP showing those around her where some good water was. That counted. I could see Army, fat, jolly Army, telling jokes to the little ones who were looking around for their mothers, and their mothers were nearby watching out for them. I could see Tilda in the middle, leaning close to Bunny, trying to tell her we needed her. We needed her smarts. We needed how she could predict where the traps were and take other routes. But Sunny was shaking her head. Sunny was curling up on the dirt like it was home. I could see ghosts almost shaking their heads at her. The ghosts who went before us, who showed us where not to go by going there and not coming back. I saw Daff. I really almost did. I saw him, the legend. The one who made it back more than once until he didn't, and he was shaking his head at our leaders, losing all hope. I finished and decided to go back to Bone. I'd go back to him nonchalantly, not looking at him. I'd be cool. I'd tell him, hey, you're right. But do it in a cool way. Do it in a way that kept me apart, hidden, peering out from the high grass of what was true. I said as I got close, hey, you're... Except I stumbled over something. I looked down. Bone was on his back. He was smiling at the awful gray sky. He'd been a weird color before. I noticed, but I walked away. I forgot how he was right, and I bent down and I said, you moron. I was crying and I was saying, you moron, you numbskull, you fucking idiot. Bone was laughing. He was panting, trying to speak to me. I leaned close enough to kiss him, and he said in a staccato of a wet death rattle, do you understand? Do you, that all things are one thing? Do you have courage to choose? You fucking idiot, I wanted to tell him. But I couldn't because I was crying. The ultimate opposite of cool, the epitome of loser. I was crying over my only friend, and everybody could hear me. They were coming over to see what was up. I wanted to shout, you fucking idiot, an idea is not enough. An idea is a gray sky, it hides the ones lying in wait. It makes the trip a death trap. An idea is what got us here, you numbskull, you moron. But even if I'd been able to talk, Bone wouldn't have heard me. He was dead. Everybody gathered around us and the wailing started. The wailing made me quiet. Bone was smiling at the gray sky, and I was quiet, hidden in the wailing, which had something in it, something distinctly true. Choose what? I thought, wishing for Bone to just stand up and tell me. Army and Tilda were keeping babies away because the babies all loved Bone like a grandpa, because kids didn't need to be cool. Choose what? I thought, wishing for Bone to bounce back from death like a rubber ball. Give me one last answer. Choose what? I thought, making my way through the crowd. The crowd parted for me. They knew Bone had been my friend, and I knew it too. I could say it now that he was gone. I thought, choose what? Though I knew now. I knew because Sonny and Hans were still crouched and would recently been in the middle of us, and would have been a spot of honor. But now everybody moved so that Bone was in the middle. I didn't belong in the middle. I don't need a spot of honor. It's time to go, I said, staring down at Sonny. Hans said, are you crazy? We can't go now. Sonny's tired. Sonny's always tired, I said. Sonny's been tired for years, and so have you. Listen, honey, Sonny, Hans said. Listen to our new guru here. Listen to him chant. Hans laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. It had been a nervous laugh for years. It had been worried for years about how the middle could move, how honor had to be daily earned. I said again, it's time to go. And I went past them. The wailing behind me softened, then it hushed. I didn't turn around to see why, to check if they were watching me take off. I thought, sweet machine, sweet, sweet machine, even though everything creaked as I got ready to go, as the parts moved and I tried to get started. You get yourself killed, Hans hollered. You're a piece of shit, you always were. Nobody ever liked you, you piece of... And he hollered a lot more, but it drowned the sound of how hard it was to get going. Nobody lying still could ever possibly know how hard it was just to get going. But I focused on the chorus in my head that said, sweet, sweet machine, sweet machine. I could swear I heard them behind me, all of them. Everybody who'd been afraid forever and was still afraid now, but who could see that I was trying to choose to be brave, like Bone told me to do. A fusillade could open up any second, but it's a trap I went into with my head held high, and that's something. And I swear I can hear them. I can hear us, and I can see, like it's really there, this gorgeous haven full of color, the sky like a spilled glass of perfect, the sun shining as bright as a promise, a place where there's nothing left to prove. And when we get there, I pray to God, or whatever goodness there is, that we have the grace to turn to one another and say, from the bottom of my heart, with all that I am, thank you.
come back tomorrow, 5:30 in the colonnade, and we'll hear the poets, and then we'll all gather for one last bit of fellowship. So thank you for coming.